and you're with Toastmasters. Chris came to me the other week. He's like, "Oh, is this going to be like your 6th speech or so?" And I'm like, "It's my 2nd actually." And I'm like, "I've been here for 9 months probably, but it's my 2nd speech. So thanks for having me, and good to be up here again." So I think it was last week. Chris talked about something that he's reading recently, and he talked about the importance of reading, and that struck a note with me. And so I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I've been reading. Show of hands, who reads the New York Times? Yeah, it's a lot of people. I'm more of a Washington Post guy myself, but recently I've been reading the Times because they've got something that I think is really worth reading. I'm going to tell you about it, and hopefully, if you haven't read it, you're going to want to read it too. Right now it's August. What do you think about when you think of August? Do you think of the sun? Do you think of going to the beach? Did you think of Food and Wine Fest that just happened last weekend? It's a fun time of year. If you missed it, I'm sorry. But this month is significant because of what happened this exact month 400 years ago. This month in the year 1619, the first slave ship arrived in the United States of America in Virginia. That began a period 250 years long in this country that was a dark and very impactful period. So this leads us to the 1619 Project from the New York Times. This is a project that focused not just on the ills of slavery itself, but it focused on the effects it had on society in the long term. It focused on impacts that it had to this day, and through a range of world-renowned historians, sociologists, journalists, it put it together the case, the story that pretty much every aspect of modern American society is a vestige of this past. So what does this mean exactly? I'll tell you a few quick little excerpts. One example, it talks about the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta, much like LA, has terrible traffic. The backups are forever. If you try to go 2 miles, it takes you 2 hours or something like that. I don't know, it's bad. The point being, traffic, you might not see a connection here, but it actually relates to this past. The highway in Atlanta was built with the purpose of splitting the city along racial lines. It split the white community and the black community on different sides. It was not built to be efficient. So the highway meanders back and forth, it doesn't go straight where it's supposed to go, and this continues to this day. Since then, the city has desegregated and everything is much more diverse on both sides, but the highway remains in traffic with it. Further, there was opposition to creating a public transit system because people in the suburbs that were largely white didn't want to have the subway connecting the two communities. Again, that has since become more diverse on both sides, but as a result of this ongoing lack of interest in creating the system, the traffic continues to this day. Another area where the 1619 Project focuses is the medical system. In the United States, as you all know, there is no universal health care. I'm sure many of you guys have workable health care, yay, it's good health care, but it's not universal and we have to work for a company to get that health care. This also has roots in the same past. If you go back to the Reconstruction era, one of the articles, this is from another acclaimed journalist, talks about how African Americans were excluded from the medical system. Then going forwards to the Fair Labor Standards Act in the 1900s, they were systematically prevented from getting those protections. Finally, in the 1930s and 1940s, there was a major African American medical association that sought to create universal health care. All their proposals were shut down with accusations of being socialism. These arguments have continued to this day, and if you watch TV, if you turn on politics and try to see arguments over universal health care, accusations of socialism continue to this day. These are things that continue to impact society. So why does all this matter? Well, I'm going to talk about the fact that we haven't, as a country, fully reconciled with this past. If you look at a country like Germany and many other countries across Europe, countries that were ravaged by the Holocaust, it is illegal in Germany to display Nazi symbolism or to even deny the Holocaust itself. In America, if you watch the news over the last few years, a lot of headlines followed monuments in the South to Confederate leaders and monuments that celebrated people who fought to save the system. This is kind of abnormal when you think about it in the context of the larger world. And this continues to my own past. When I was in middle school, in my history class, I went to a pretty well-regarded middle school back in Ohio. My history teacher taught us that the Civil War was fought not over slavery, but over states' rights. And if you know anything about slavery and if you know anything about the Civil War, that's just not true. There was quotes from the Confederacy itself. There was quotes, if you look at the Emancipation Proclamation as a whole, it's simply not true. But that's something that I was taught and didn't realize until later, upon further research and upon taking courses in college. That's a lie that's taught across the education system. Many people are taught that, textbooks teach that, and it's an issue because if you look at the government itself and the backlash to this collection of articles, to the 1619 Project, the former House Republican Speaker, Newt Gingrich, tweeted calling it, quote, propaganda. The president himself called it, quote, a racism witch hunt. This comes from a lack of reconciling with the past in this country. This is a lack of reconciling that we need to address. We need to address it through reading. I hope you guys choose to read. Thank you.